Hello, everyone, and welcome wherever you are in the world to this two-day webinar on waste management and the circular economy. Nordic best practices brought to you by the Asian Development Bank, the Embassy of Sweden, Manila, the Norwegian Embassy, Manila, the Royal Danish Embassy, Manila, and Business Sweden. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Rico Hizon, your host and moderator for this webinar. And it is wonderful to see hundreds of participants joining us at this hour from all over the world for this important gathering. And we start off today's event with a welcome address from His Excellency, Ambassador Bjorn Johnson from the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Manila. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Rico. So as you mentioned, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this event, which is hosted by the Norwegian embassies in Manila and by the Asian Development Bank. I want to thank the team that has worked tirelessly over the past months to bring this event to fruition. And a special thanks goes out to the Nordic Council of Ministers, which has granted financial support to this event. The Nordic Council of Ministers is the official body for intergovernmental cooperation in the Nordic region. And our vision is that the Nordic region will become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. And promoting the circular economy and sustainable waste management are important components of this vision. And over the coming 2 days, you will be able to meet some of the leading experts in the Nordic region on these topics, and some of the most innovative Nordic companies which have creative solutions to solve the problems of waste. It is my hope that in the course of this event, we may establish a dialogue with our Filipino partners to exchange views and experiences which may assist the Philippines in meeting the huge challenges of sustainable waste management ahead. So salamat po, and back to you, Rico.
Maraming salamat po, Your Excellency. Mabuhay ka. And thank you so much for your welcome remarks. And for sure, Your Excellency, all of today's participants will learn so much from our panelists joining us from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And before I introduce our speakers to all our participants joining us right now online, we have an audience poll question. And we want to find out your views and sentiments on recycling waste and recyclable biodegradable packaging from where you are in the world, whether you are from the public or the private sector. So here is the polling question, and we will give all of you 10 seconds basically to answer the polling question. So let me ask you the question. Here it is. Would you be willing to pay a little extra when buying a bottled drink if this money was later refunded to you after returning the container for recycling? Let me re-ask you that question. Would you be willing to pay a little extra when buying a bottled drink if this money was later refunded to you after returning the container for recycling? All right, you have 10 seconds to answer, and the countdown starts now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. We would like to see the results of the poll. Well, excellent. Everyone is very willing to pay a little extra. Congratulations. Thank you so much for more than 80% of our participants who voted that they are willing to pay a little extra when buying a bottled drink if this money was later refunded to you after returning the container for recycling. So we are really off to a good start for this webinar, which focuses on the circular economy. Thank you very much for your participation in this audience poll. All right, let's now switch on to our panel discussion segment, wherein we showcase individual Nordic companies and focus on the advantages and opportunities of a circular economy. So moving towards a more circular economy could deliver benefits such as reducing pressure on the environment, improving the security of the supply of raw materials, increasing competitiveness, stimulating innovation, boosting economic growth, and more importantly, creating jobs. So let us take a look now at who our panelists are for today. Our first panelist is all the way in Norway. He is the chief scientist and the program manager of SINTEF. SINTEF is one of Europe's largest independent research organizations. And for more than 70 years, SINTEF has developed solutions and innovation for society and customers all over the world. So let us all please welcome to this webinar, Dr. Cora Carstensen. Thank you very much, Dr. Carstensen. Our second panelist is from Sweden. He is the Senior Vice President, the head of Circular Economy Asia for TOMRA. TOMRA's mission is to create sensor-based solutions for optimal resource productivity, making sustainability profitable with increased relevance and meaning. Let us all please welcome Mr. Jacob Roghaug. You know, if we were at the Asian Development Bank with all our speakers coming from all over the world, it would have been a little bit more livelier, and we would even have the applause of the audience and all the participants. But we are totally now in what you call a new normal. So our third panelist is from Denmark. He is the head of corporate social responsibility and the circular economy, Dansk System. The firm runs a Danish deposit system which ensures that disposable beverage packaging made of plastic, aluminium, and glass are recycled. And this is good for the environment and the climate due to the process saving natural resources and energy. Let us all please welcome Mr. Peter Engel. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And our reactor for today, and we will be hearing her expert comments right after we hear all of the panelists talking about the opportunities and challenges of a circular economy. She is the Senior Urban Development Specialist, Southeast Asia Urban Development and Water Division at the Asian Development Bank. Let us all please welcome Alison Woodruff. Thank you so much for joining us today in this webinar. And let's kick things off with this question, Dr. Carstensen, about Optise, which is a SINTEF regional project covering the countries of China, India, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. Can you share with us, give us a backgrounder, what is the main purpose and objective of this project of SINTEF?
Thank you, Rico. The main purpose and objective of this project is actually to focus on inadequate treatment of plastic waste on land. You know, this is the main source of plastic to the sea, insufficient waste management on land. And our project Optise wants to investigate how we can involve private energy intensive industry like cement manufacturing to be involved in treatment of non-recyclable plastic waste and actually increase the treatment capacity. And the reason why we have established this project in China, India, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam is because these represent 3 billion people, where half live along waterways. They have the largest release of plastic waste to the sea through the rivers. They have the highest plastic waste plastic consumption in the world, and also the highest plastic waste production, meaning 176,000 tons per day of plastic waste, which is still needing improved treatment options. But on the other side, these 5 countries have the highest energy intensive industry in the world, representing 75% of the cement production, 75% of the steel production, 75% of the power production in the world, representing a big chunk of the world's CO2 emissions, using hundreds of millions of tons of coal in thousands of plants, which can relatively easily replace some of this coal with fossil fuels, plastic waste, and remove it and hinder it to release and leach into the sea, becoming a microplastic in the future.
So, Dr. Carstensen, briefly, how are your projects moving forward in China, India, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam?
We are in the pipeline now to actually launch what we call pilot projects, where we are going to demonstrate in each of these countries with different waste streams, different sources of plastic waste, how it's possible. We will look into the performance, that means benefits and limitation of this practice, and actually to showcase that this is possible. And I have to mention that this is what we are doing in Norway. We have been using our cement industry for the last more than 30 years to take all the organic hazardous waste that we have produced. And today, our cement industry in Norway is replacing more than 75% of its coal use with waste, which otherwise would have needed to be landfilled, or we had to build new incinerators to burn it.
So what you have done in Norway, can it be replicated in emerging Asian economies? Can it be done?
Definitely. And the potential is tremendous. I just mentioned that in Norway, we have what we call a thermal substitution rate of 75%, meaning they replace 75% of the coal in their cement production. The same TSR, or thermal substitution rate, in the Asian cement industry is today in average around 3%. So the potential is enormous, and we can really reduce the coal consumption, and we can speed up the treatment of what we call non-recyclable plastic waste. Remember, we are not targeting, recycling. We would see most of the plastic being recycled, but there is a lot of plastic which are not recyclable.
A lot of potential for Asia's emerging economies, but it has to be implemented. Mr. Ronghao, let me get to you now. Tomer has around 60% global market share of high-end sensor-based sorting systems for the waste and recycling industry. What is sensor-based sorting, and what role does it play for the circular economy?
Thank you, Rico, and thank you for having me here today. Sensor-based sorting, actually since the mid-90s, sensor-based sorting have been found in most waste sorting and recycling plants around the world. So this system, they utilize advanced sensors and software algorithms, including artificial intelligence, to identify material properties, unique material properties of objects in the waste and the recycling stream. And then we use high-pressure air jets to separate out the targeted material. Mechanical arms can also be used for this separation, often referred to as waste sorting robots. So different polymer types, so PE, PP, PS, PET, and so on, and also different colors can be detected, different paper grades can be detected, so we can separate cardboard and newspapers and beverage cartons, different metal grades, even textiles, so wool and cotton and polyester can be separated, and all of this can then be sorted out for the best use. The sensor-based
Mr. Ronghao, is this technology already being adopted in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so we have machines all over the world for this. We are in more than 40 countries, and we have more than 6,000 units. And they are found in China, we have in India, we have in Korea, in Japan, in Australia, we have in Vietnam, and most of the European countries, and also US. So all over the world, we have it.
But you mentioned just Vietnam. What about the Philippines? Are we going to eventually see this high-end sensor-based sorting system for waste and the recycling industry being adopted here in the country?
We hope so. We have been following several projects in the Philippines. Today, we don't have that, but we hope already next year that we see the first machines being installed in the plastic recycling industry. But I brought a video that maybe we could show to give the audience an idea about what sensor-based sorting is.
All right.
And this is showing that this is more about, it has a bigger impact than the sorting itself. So the plant you will see now displayed, it's the first plant in the world that sort all traditional recyclables from mixed collected waste. We all know that very often source separation has been used, but in this plant, the waste is not source separated. The plant was installed in 2009. It has a capacity of about 40 tons per hour input. Different pre-treatment equipment is used to open up the bags, liberate the waste, spread it out. Magnets are used for taking out the ferrous, eddy currents for taking out non-ferrous or aluminum. There it goes through various processes of site separation. Here you see screening, which takes out the oversized and the fines. Further mechanical process will separate the flexible material like paper and film from the hard material like shoes and bottles, hard plastic, stones, and so on. At this point, we come in with the sensor-based sorting. And now we follow the 3D, the hard plastic and the rigid material stream. And here, sensors are scanning all the material that passes through the belt. And then we use airjet to eject the targeted fractions. In this case, we are sorting out PET bottles. And what you see here is, at this picture, is 100% automatically recovered PET bottles from mixed collected waste. It has more than between 40 and 50% organic content in the input. If you go back some years, before 2009, the world didn't think this was possible. And of course, this opens opportunity. Like in Norway, we have municipalities in Norway that have been running traditional source separation, where the consumer is asked to put the plastic packaging in one container, while the residue waste goes in the other. The problem is that over decades now, it's proven that people are not so good at sorting. This municipality implemented what they call centralized sorting. That means they ask the consumer to put all the plastic packaging in the rest waste. But instead of sending this directly to incineration, they send it to a sorting plant. And they increase the recycling rate by 4 times by changing from source separation to centralized sorting. And of course, in the circular economy, it's really key. It's not so difficult, but the key is to extract more recyclables from nature, from landfill, and from incineration. This can enable and boost the circular economy for plastic.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roghav, for that explanation. Let's get over to you now, Mr. Engel. What is the circular business model for you at Dank's retro system? And how does climate and the environment benefit from your circular business model?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rico, and thank you for inviting us. The main purpose for Dansk Retursystem is to collect all deposit-marked bottles and cans within the Danish borders, and to sort them and to reinsure that they will be reused for new bottles and cans. So that is our main purpose. We are a private-owned company, but we are non-profit. So every bottle and cans have to pay for their own costs, and for that we have a setup that everyone who put bottles and cans into the market, they have to pay a fee, and by that we can actually run the system on a non-profit basis.
All right. Is this already being adopted, Mr. Engel, in emerging Asian economies?
Not to my knowledge, no, but it's adopted in many places in the world, both in Europe, both Norway, Denmark, and Sweden and Finland already have systems like this, but also in other parts of Europe and also in North America. So it is adopted in many different ways. Australia is also having a system, as far as I know. I think Tamil is there as well. Yeah, so Denmark is a small country, 6 million people. So for other countries, I think it should be large countries like the Philippines, you should think in maybe a city-based or regional-based model. You cannot make a national system, or it can be difficult. You should think about different setups, organizational setups. But we also have a legal framework, so to ensure that we are actually we are running the system, and we have the exclusive right to run the system, and that's you have to think about volume in order to actually get the benefit, also the financial benefit out of the system.
And Mr. Engel, container deposit schemes like the ones in Denmark and Norway have been highly effective in diverting valuable materials from the waste stream. Why do you think that more countries haven't yet implemented such a scheme?
I think you have to have the legal framework in place, and then you have to. We also have a tradition in Denmark, a long-based tradition for this. But Dansk Retursystem has only been here for 20 years, and that is for the one-way packaging in plastic, aluminium, and glass. And it is possible to make a simple setup in the beginning, but you also have to have a good cooperation between those who are bringing the packaging into the market, the shops, the stores, and also have to have good information to the consumers. Why should they return the bottle? What are the benefits of returning the bottles, both for them? The poll we had in the beginning saying that 88% would actually be willing to pay a little extra if they're sure to get back the money, and that is how the system runs. And over time, we are actually lowering year by year, lowering the cost for running through the bottles and cans in our system. And then we have a close cooperation with those who actually received our material to ensure that they are making it into new bottles and cans.
And before we proceed with this panel discussion on the circular economy, I would just like to remind all our 260 participants right now that if you have any questions, you may just click on the Q&A function, and you can send over your questions, because in about 20 minutes, we will have like an open forum wherein you can ask your respective questions to our panelists, Dr. Carstensen, Mr. Roghaug, and Mr. Engel. But you'll have to type in your respective questions in the Q&A function. And we would also like to let you all know that the presentation and recording of this webinar will be available for all after this webinar. So, Dr. Carstensen, let's take a look again at the circular economy. The idea and the logic is really very compelling for many of us here in Southeast Asia. But the big question is, why aren't companies doing enough? Why aren't they doing it already?
Christine, maybe you could start showing some of the photos while I'm explaining. It's a good question, Rico. We actually introduced this, we call it co-processing when we do waste management in the cement industry, when we replace coal with waste. And we call it co-processing. And we introduced the concept in China in 2005. And at that time, they were very skeptical to use already existing industry, but they realized very soon that it might be a huge benefit and increase the capacity for waste treatment really tremendously. And after 12 years, today, this is one of the main strategies in China, to use existing industry to treat waste. They can save coal, they can avoid building new incinerators, they can avoid building or enlarging, landfills, etc. And what you see on the screen behind you is some photos from the pilots that are going on. And we are focusing on various waste streams, which is, as I mentioned earlier, non-recyclable. That means we look at what has been produced up to now in the world, and we see that there is probably more than 5 billion tons of non-recyclable plastic waste which are dumped in dump sites. Only in Thailand, for example, we have estimated that there are 190 million tons of plastic waste in 2,500 dump sites. And one of the pilots that we are doing in Thailand is to mine and take out and sort various fractions from all dump sites and use, for example, the plastic fraction as a fuel replacement in the production of cement in Saraburi, in the second largest cement producer in Thailand. And they can actually remove 250,000 tons of plastic waste annually. And they are doing it voluntarily. They see that they can reduce their coal consumption. They can actually, maybe in the future, they can take some charge, some fees for doing waste management. And they can even, at certain point in time, realize and sell their surplus CO2 quota if they are part of a quota system. This is at least what's happening in Europe. So I think when we start these pilot projects around in the region, we see that it, gets attention from competitors. They start to see that, oh, is that nearby cement plant starting to use waste instead of coal? Oh, that must be a very good business. And then it spreads very gradually, and it spreads by itself. And very soon, the cement industry can actually, in a way, be integrated in sustainable waste management and resource efficiency. And the only thing the government can do is to build a proper regulatory framework and sit back and control that this is done in a proper way, as we have been doing in Norway for the last 30 years. But it takes some incentives. And even in the Philippines, cement industry have already started at a low level doing co-processing, but it's coming. I'm pretty sure it's coming. And especially we move these, more than 5 billion tons of accumulated plastic waste in dump site. It really needs to be addressed because this will leach into our ocean in the foreseeable future. And it's not really on the global agenda.
So, Mr. Rogao, it seems like there seems to be a lot of barriers here. I mean, Dr. Carstensen mentioned about incentives, regulatory framework. It could also be the cost and the investment to be able to shift from a linear to a circular economy and implementing this technological innovations.
Yes, on a global scale today, technology and system exists. But it is a dilemma. Why is it not implemented to a larger scale? If you look at plastic packaging, we have about 14% of the global plastic packaging produced every year is actually recycled, and only as little as 2% of that goes into closed loop. Well, what is clear is that in all the successful markets, that means those who have the highest recycling rates and have a closed loop recycling actually playing out, the government have played a key role. So the government has taken the initiative and set the stage with stable frame conditions, policies, and incentives to drive this. We need a little bit of long-term thinking. If the government change regulations and ambitions on yearly basis, it doesn't work. Many of these infrastructures that need to be in place, they operate 10, 15, 20 and more years. So we need to have a stable frame conditions. And if this is in place, then the industry can evolve within. We see some of the most effective means are extended producer responsibility. They vary in how well they are mandated, but well-mandated systems are highly efficient. Deposit legislation, like Peter Engel mentioned, is the #1 in terms of collection rate for beverage containers, with Germany at the top with 98% collection of PET bottles put into the market. And then there are other means that also can be done, because if we want to have more closed high-end recycling, closed-loop recycling, the government can implement means to incentivize the use of recycled material back into new raw material. Today, it's mainly only PET bottles that we see being closed loop recycled. And that is technically possible to do much more than that. And now we are in a situation where the global brands, driven by the global awareness of the environmental impact from plastic pollution, littering, and also CO2 emissions, they make pledges. And today, the demand for high-quality recyclates for polyolefins, so PO, P, PP, even PS, and PET trace and so on, is far higher than the supply is. So now, if the government can provide even further incentives to do that and facilitate waste management that can aggregate large enough volumes, the technology is there where you can actually supply this demand with high quality recyclates. And then we will see that these 2% and 14% dramatically can be improved.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Engel, governments here in emerging Asian market economies and the smaller local government units have to really be educated and to be made aware of the role of high level technology and what it can play basically in recovering and adding value to waste.
Yeah, I think it's very important here. Maybe Christine, you can show my second slide if that's possible. And it's just to yeah, the next one please. Yeah, thank you very much. And it's just to follow up what is said about the high level collection of waste, because if you just collect waste and put it all into the same stream, if you look on the right side of my slide, it's not the best way. The good way is to sort it out by systems like TOMRA provides, and to keep the material in the closed loop within the different parts. So you keep bottle to bottle, can to can, and other food packaging you can keep aside. Don't start using plastic bottles to make clothes, for instance. If you have a clear stream, you have a very good material, and you should keep it in that closed loop as good as possible. So when we are collecting, for instance, we collect 94% of those plastic bottles coming into the Danish market is actually coming back, and we are ensuring that they are made into new bottles. And by that, we also have a good financial situation, because we actually sell high-end material, so we can get a good price for our material. And so those who are making it into new plastic bottles, they are very interested in this material. They see it as a high-end material. It's food-grade material. So set up a system so you can keep the material separated. That is very important. Whether you do it by sorting at the source, or you sort it, or you sort it centrally, like TOMRA is providing system for. But you should keep the materials aside. That is very important to also get the financial benefit of such a system. And besides from that, you have a big benefit on the environment, on the climate. For instance, the bottles and cans collected in Denmark, we save more than 150,000 tons of CO2 per year, compared to if you were going to make the same bottles and cans from new material. So we have many good stories here that are to be told, both to the decision makers and also to the consumers.
Mm-hmm. The circular economy, definitely, from what I've heard from you gentlemen, has really many advantages and opportunities, particularly now. For example, here in the Philippines, we've been experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic, and then you also have basically back-to-back typhoons that have really impacted the country. So if you could share with us, first of all, Dr. Carstensen, what can governments and development partners like the Asian Development Bank do at this point to help countries here in Southeast Asia transition from the linear to the circular economy?
First of all, I would like, since you brought COVID-19 into the picture, I will just tell you a story from Wuhan during the outbreak in February. You remember, hospitals, they experienced a growth in healthcare and hospital waste generation, which reached more than 600% almost overnight. And they had no capacity to get rid of highly infectious waste. And even worse for, low contaminated waste like, gloves, healthcare protection devices, etc. Many things made of plastic. Then we actually mobilized the local cement industry outside and around Wuhan. And they took care of hundreds of thousands of tons of healthcare waste and used it beneficially in their cement production. So it was a win-win solution, which is possible to adopt under local circumstances. But then you need to have kind of awareness. You need to have understanding and knowledge about these solutions, of course. And I think many places, government seems to tend to look into, for example, building incinerators or new landfills, which is basically, intermediate solutions. When you destroy these plastic things into a cement option, you don't create any residues. It's a complete disposal solution. You utilize all the energy and all the ash in the plastic waste. And it's a sustainable and resource efficient solution. But you need to open the eyes of the government and the industry to see the possibilities. And that's where we come in from Norway, for example, through this project. And we create a platform where we educate and we showcase the possibilities. And we bring on board universities, students, do research, NGOs, governments, etc. And then when they see by themselves that this looks good, it's a kind of win-win solution, then it starts. Then the snowball starts to roll.
We always have to look at the long-term benefits for the circular economy. And Mr. Rogha, would you like to add to what Dr. Carstensen just said?
Yeah, maybe I can add a bit that there will always be some rest fractions, right? It's not realistic to think that 100% of the waste will go into a closed loop. What I mentioned earlier in my introduction here about centralized sorting can be strategically a hub in the long-term waste management system. So it can simplify collection scheme, save cost, make it convenient for the consumer. And then in the sorting plant, this can be adapted over time. So while some of the plastic today is not really suitable for, or there are no value chains for high-end recycling, yes, it can go into processes that Helge Carstensen is promoting for high energy utilization. But we know that the industry will develop over time. And if you have a centralized sorting as part of your waste management scheme, you can extract these polymers as the market gets available for that. And then you are not burning it, because plastic, especially today made from fossil fuel, shouldn't be burned. Even if it's made from renewable resources, studies show that if we can keep it in a closed loop, so through mechanical recycling, we have both energy and environmental benefits from that. But we need to be pragmatic as well. So there is not one solution that fits all, but centralized sorting can enable you to utilize the best available systems over time as well. And just also to mention that what you saw was a highly automatic sorting plant, but we are now having the first plant in India, and that's a highly, let's say, it's a high level of manual sorting in there. So there is a combination, and that's simply driven for economic reasons. So in some markets, you will see more manual label. In Norway, it's fully automatic. and you can tailor it to what is needed, and you can also modify it over time. And if to enable this, what is needed is you need a minimum capacity. In India, just to give a reference there, we say that automation really becomes financially attractive if you have more than 200 to 300 tons per day. But whatever you do, if you have higher volumes, waste management is a volume game. It always brings more opportunities to consolidate the waste processing and drive volumes and reduce costs that way.
There's so much good happening right now in circular economy, particularly in the Nordic countries. So, Mr. Engel, for us here in Asia, what can governments and development partners like the ADB do to help countries transition from linear to circular economies?
Yeah, I think it's very important what Mr. Rockenhaus is saying, that there's not one solution for this. You have to think about different solutions for different problems. And you have to be aware that cooperation between different partners in the value chain is very important, because you can maybe sort out the plastic or different types of waste very good. But if you don't have someone else to actually use those materials afterwards, then it's of no use. Then it will just end up in incineration or in a landfill. So you have to think about the whole value chain, and you have to think about cooperation, both within your own borders, but also abroad. And then to ensure that whatever you do with your waste, especially if you ship it on to somewhere else, that you actually have documentation for what is going to happen to this waste. And then to keep the waste in these different, is it high-end waste? What can be used? Is it food grade waste? Keep it separate. And think about the hierarchy in waste. What can be used for what? And some can go into Mr. Carstensen's setup. Some can go to something else. But cooperation and in the whole value chain, and not one solution for everything. That will be my main point, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that very insightful exchange on the circular economy. Let's now bring in Ms. Alison Woodruff from the Asian Development Bank for her reaction to your responses. Ms. Woodruff, from what you've heard from Dr. Carstensen, from Mr. Engel and Mr. Ronghow, how relevant or applicable are these systems to Southeast Asian economies?
Thank you, Rico, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's great to have the opportunity to comment on some of the really interesting talks we've heard this afternoon. It's been really interesting to hear us about some of the Nordic systems and technologies that are being deployed, particularly the ones that have already been deployed in the region in Southeast Asia. I think this discussion on the circular economy is very timely, specifically for ADB under our new long-term strategy 2030. We've specifically committed to helping countries transition towards a circular economy in support of our two key pillars, being tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and encouraging environmental sustainability, and the second pillar of building livable cities. The circular economy is also very much linked to our action plan for healthy oceans and sustainable blue economies, where tackling plastic pollution is a key priority. As we heard today from the speakers, the circular economy is very much about closing the loop. It's about promoting materials and recovery and reuse, and keeping these in the economy for as long as possible to avoid using new materials and driving as much use and value out of existing materials in the system to minimize waste. And I think this is very relevant for the region because until the COVID pandemic, countries in Southeast Asia had been growing exponentially. And accompanying this has been rapid urbanization, rapid consumption levels, and as well, unfortunately, growing streams of waste generation. And and now I think, as you heard some of the statistics, almost a quarter of the world's waste is derived from the Asia Pacific region, and 5 countries, China, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines account for more than half of the world's plastic waste pollution. So I think it's very stark and relevant for that Southeast Asia really has to transition to more circular economy models. I think the current linear model is no longer an option with continued growth. It's critical to decouple materials use from economic growth by moving towards circular economy approaches using some of the technologies that we've learned about today. But at the same time, I guess one point I wanted to raise is that I certainly think high-tech systems are a critical part of solving Southeast Asia's solid waste management challenges. But one of the issues, I guess, is we can't forget that in the region, we have a very large and dynamic informal sector for waste recovery and reuse. These are the people that go door to door collecting recyclable bottles. These are the waste pickers that work in dump sites to recover waste with value, as well as the micro enterprises that resell on materials for reuse to producers. So they're a very key part of the equation here in the region. But often these are the workers that work in very dangerous, unsafe conditions, and also recovery of waste efficiency tends to be quite low because of the very basic technology. So I think Southeast Asia's challenge is not just thinking about how to promote greater materials recovery and reuse moving towards a circular economy approach, but also how to integrate these informal sector systems and modernizing them to minimize the impact on the informal sector jobs. And I think I've taken up most of my time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for your insights, Alison Woodruff from the Asian Development Bank. And now let's move on to the question and answer forum. I see that there are a lot of questions coming in from our 265 participants who are joining us live right now for this webinar on the circular economy. Let's start off with the first question for Dr. Carstensen. I'll try to ask all of our panelists these questions, but if we could just try to keep our answers short, because we have about 11 minutes left before the end of this webinar. And the question is, are there positive economic financial results from waste separation in developing countries? Doctor.
Sure. I mean, all waste should be sorted and separated. It's much easier to handle and much easier to extract value from clean and sorted material. But, you know, as I mentioned, our aim is to actually increase the treatment capacity for mixed and, you know, really complex waste streams, which are, for example, laying in dump sites, etc., which cannot have a value, but which needs to be removed or entering into the ocean as microplastic. Because if it just lay it there, let it be there, it will take over the fish in the next few decades, actually. And that's a disaster. So we need to do something about also that waste streams. But I think what we have seen here today is a very complementary solution with all the solution providers, which has been on the stage so far.
Jacob, here's a question for you. Is recyclable waste recovery and recycling a profitable private sector venture? What incentives can government grant to the private sector to encourage them to venture into this industry?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's probably not one answer to that. I mean, if you look at waste and if you look at the plastic, there are some of the polymers that are highly valuable. PET is the most sought after, and you will see, I see it here in China, and you will see in India, probably in the Philippines as well, that a lot of the informal sector, what they target is the high value plastic. And that means it's possible to make a profitable business simply by picking it up, sourcing it through a long value chain of stakeholders and turn it into recycling, into new raw material. But there are some problems here as well, because in China, for instance, that used to recycle 50% of all the global PET, it's 100% downcycling. So if you leave this to the open markets and no incentives, no control by the government, what you will see a cherry picking of the high valuables, and you will see you cannot secure a closed loop recycling, because it will all follow, you know, the global economy and the oil price and the demand. So it's not a sustainable solution. That is why the government can go in, implement means, set requirements, extend the producer responsibility, and within this framework, you can make any waste management and any recycling profitable. So it's very often looking at the alternatives. Again, here in China, we've seen a lot of waste being recycled, even though they have a high informal sector that take out the most valuables. If we sort the waste before the incineration, because we can extract some low value plastic, but we can also save money on the cost it is to incinerate it, it becomes profitable. So the municipality saves money. Just an example to illustrate it, it's not one solution that fits all. We need to look at the current situation and the current infrastructure, and government plays a key role to actually form this and drive it towards sustainability.
And here's a follow-up question for you, Mr. Roghaug. What would be the advantage of having a high-end sorting in a country which has relatively lower cost of labor?
Yeah, so any sorting plant you will combine. If labor is efficient and cost efficient, you will use that. But what we see more and more, and also here in China, the bigger players, they go more and more into automation. And there is one thing about automation. It might not be 100% perfect purity on what it sorts, but it's stable. And when you go in high volumes, you want stable and predictable frame conditions. People are not so suitable for that. So we welcome it, and we see that there is a gradual transition. But as volumes grow and as you aim for higher purity, so more closed loop, right, technology brings advantages that people cannot do.
Mr. Engel, a question for you here. One of our participants noticed that most of the materials discussed for the circular economy is for inorganic solid waste. Is the circular economy also applicable for food and organic waste, or is that a different concept?
I'm not an expert in that, but yes, it's possible also to make a business on that. Again, you have to be sure what is it you collect, what is it used for. You should also keep a close loop there. In Denmark and other countries, you have a collection of food, organic waste that used for making biogas. So that's one option. But we should also, in that perspective, look into the waste of food. We throw out too much actually usable food, especially in the richer part of the world, and that is not a good story. So we should also start reducing our what we produce before we know actually how much do we need. So that's also a perspective on that. But yes, it's possible. We have companies in both Denmark and other places in the world that actually make a business on organic waste. That's a possibility.
Dr. Carstensen, here's a question from one of the participants. What about emissions due to burning plastic and waste? Have there been studies based on these pilot projects in the region, specifically in China?
Yes, there has. This co-processing in the cement industry started already 40 years ago in the US and spread to Europe, etc. And there has been conducted, very, very comprehensive and lengthy research into the impact on emissions, possible impact on health and environment, possible impact on quality of the cement, etc. And I would say, basically all this research has shown that if you replace parts of the coal with waste containing energy, it will not affect the emissions, for example. But of course, you need to follow the best practice and do this in a proper and responsible way, as all other waste management have to follow. Even incinerators and landfill need to do it in the proper way. So if you do it properly, it will not affect the emissions.
All right, we're down to our last 2 minutes before we wrap up at the top of the hour. Another question for Mr. Roghaug. In Europe, EU directives had extremely important, plays an extremely important role in defining policy and responsibility to reach the defined goals. Is this the goal as well in Asia? Can the ADB support the region to reach the SDG goals and help to define policies?
Was that the question for me? Or?
Yes, that's right. It's a question for everybody. It's a question for everybody that it just basically popped up here from one of the participants. But most probably we should be asking this question maybe to Alison. In Europe, yes, Alison, this question is for you.
And I think, one of the common threads that we heard through the talks today was the importance of having the enabling regulations, policies, and frameworks in place to create the incentives for transitioning to a circular economy. And certainly that's where ADB does come in. We work with our developing member countries, not just on the physical infrastructure and the investments, but very much working on the softer policy and regulatory components through technical assistance and so on. So certainly that's a priority for us for support.
All right. As a final word for all our participants, maybe we could ask them. Let's start off with you, Jacob. What changes in national policies and institutional mechanisms are seen to aid in the faster transition to a circular economy? You have 30 seconds to answer that.
As I earlier mentioned, long-term plans, stability, extended producer responsibility has proven to be very effective. Deposit system for beverage containers is the best system in the world. And then encourage recycled content in new products. Incentivize the use of recycled material in new products and new packaging. That can boost circular economy and drive the industry towards implementation.
Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Engel.
The same question?
Yes, same question, just basically to wrap up our discussion.
Yeah, I think to put up, the extended producers' responsibility is a very good way to deal with this, and then to be ensure that you have the proper documentation on what is actually put up demands for documentation for what is actually happening to the waste you are collecting. Wherever, whether it's bottles and cans or it's other type of waste, that is important as well. So you can you should keep track on what is actually happening to your waste and put up demands on what should be happening. So yeah, I think that will be the main point from my point of view.
And finally, Dr. Carstensen.
Yeah, I think basically we have no choice. We have one planet and we have limited resources, and we really need to start to look into the possibility of integrated options. And, circular economy is very fundamental. I think the government need to look into the problems, need to give priorities to the biggest problems first, try to solve them, and look into their internal or domestic possibilities to involve private actors. I think, they are very often forgotten, and they can be a huge benefit in the future waste management system in the country if they are taken on board seriously.
Thank you so much for that, and to all our participants who asked our panelists those very interesting and compelling questions. A lot to learn about the circular economy. We would like to thank our panelists for this webinar on the circular economy, Dr. Carstensen Ms. Roghaug, and Mr. Engel. And for the closing remarks on this first of a two-day webinar on waste management and on the circular economy, Nordic best practices, we would like to welcome Your Excellency, Ambassador Greta Sellesen of the Royal Danish Embassy in Manila. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Rico, and thank you very much to our speakers. And I think this session has shown us how huge the potential is for circular economy. It has also shown us that it's quite a complex process, and it takes the involvement of the decision makers, political and its administrative decision makers. So if you're listening in, when you're listening in here to us today, please make sure that you get started providing the right framework here in the Philippines for the circular economy, because that's needed. And as one of the speakers said, we need the long-term involvement. But it has also shown that private initiative can take us very, very far. As we know from all greening processes, they pay off. The bottom line is that they pay off, maybe in the short run, but definitely in the long run. So there is no need for waiting any longer. Also, we have heard, and one of the questions also touched upon that a circular economy and the SDGs go hand in hand. Quite a number of the SDGs fit actually into this scheme. It's good for us all when we make sure that we reach the SDGs, but we also have to consider, the companies have to consider that the global consumer is becoming more and more picky. More and more consumers look at, does this company actually live up to the SDGs? So that is another aspect of the SDGs. For me as a Dane, I was glad to see the result of the poll. 88% were willing to accept that if you pay a bit more for your bottle and you get it back at the end of the your use of the bottle, then people are willing to do that. Because as a Dane, this is probably one of my first experiences with circular economy, was exactly the thing, that it was no longer a free ride to use your bottle or your can, but that we actually have to collect it and carry it back. So I can only recommend that everything is put into system, because it becomes second nature. In the beginning, you think it's difficult, but then you learn to do it like you learn to sort your waste or whatever it is. So it's a matter of getting started, and we all have to get used to it, and we all have to do it. Then I would like to conclude by going to an example of a famous Danish company. Here you go, Carlsberg Beer. Around 45% of their CO2 emissions actually came from the company's packing. So they have developed now, taking recycling a step further. This is the world's first fully biodegradable beer bottle, and it's made from wood fiber. And it's called the Green Fiber Bottle, and you can read more about it in one of the white papers that we will present with the material that will go out with all the material from here. So if I could have the last slide. I think, yeah, there you go. Even drinking beer, even by drinking beer, we can contribute to the circular economy. So I think we all deserve it here by the end of the seminar and by the end of a long working day. And as they would say in Carlsberg, with a typical Danish understatement, probably the best beer in the world. So to all our participants, mabuhay, salamat po.
Cheers, Your Excellency. Thank you so much for those thoughtful and insightful words. And we would like to thank all of you for joining us today. We learned so much about the circular economy, closing the loop to promote materials recovery and reuse, and keeping these in the economy for as long as possible to reduce the need for new materials and to derive as much use and value from them. Join us again tomorrow for the second day of the webinar as we tackle waste management and producer responsibility, Nordic best practices, brought to you by the Asian Development Bank, the Embassy of Sweden, Manila, the Norwegian Embassy, Manila, the Royal Danish Embassy, Manila, and Business Sweden. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm Rico Hizon. See you again tomorrow. Bye for now.